All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all glory and praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Honors and salutations to the hopeful elect, pushing his word in truth and sincerity. All right, this is the brother Tawab Kha from GMS Los Angeles / Inland Empire, coming back with another video in the spirit. And once again, Tawadi Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem HaKodash, for opening my eyes to this truth, allowing me to wake up another day, and putting the spirit on me to do another lesson in hopes to edify and the hopeful elect. Okay, so what I want to go into in this lesson is the heart is deceitful. Okay, and I'm going into this is because this is something we all deal with on a daily basis. Okay, dealing with the thoughts. Okay, and having thoughts about many different things. It varies from brother to brother. Wherever that's heavy on a brother's mind, these are the thoughts that we have to constantly battle. Okay, because the person that we're the main opposition, I should say, is ourself in this thing. Okay, and it starts in the mind. Okay, and that's why the scriptures speak about self-examination. Okay, we have to constantly self-examine ourselves, and that's how we're able to work out those kinks, and constantly work at those kinks, because it's a non-stop thing. It's not no thing where you get to a point where you don't need to work out those kinks. This is a constant thing that we're involved in, and we're always learning, we're always growing. Okay, so this is just something I want to focus on in this lesson, because like I said, I know brothers out there are dealing with this, man. Apostles, elders, they've been dealing with it, but us that's the younger generations, we're starting to experience these things in this walk, and that's why I want to get across in this video. Hopefully, it be edifying to you brothers and comforting to you brothers as well. And one thing I want to say before I get into the scriptures is, wherever brothers are dealing with within their within themselves, you're not alone. None of us are alone. Wherever that thing is that a brother is battling in his mind, just know his brother's going through the same thing. It may not be the same situation or scenario that you may be going through. It may be totally different. But what I mean is by the same, meaning we all have thoughts with these thoughts that come across our mind, wicked thoughts, thoughts of folly, wherever the case may be. Okay, we all deal with these things. So when brothers find themselves in that in that mode, in that moment, just remember that you're not alone. Okay, so with all that being said, I'm gonna get right into it, and like I said, I pray this be edifying. So the first scripture I'm gonna start with is the obvious, is Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 9. It says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?" Okay, and the heart is referring to the mind. Okay, the mind is deceitful. Okay, because your mind, you can place different scenarios in your mind, right? But in reality, you know, things, you know, wherever it's, you know, you're playing in your mind is totally different from what's going on in reality. And that's how the mind can become deceitful, because, you know, things that go on in your mind, you know, if you keep entertaining it, you know, you'll actually believe those thoughts are real, you know, and then you'll start to act upon those thoughts. You know, you'll start to you know, buy into those thoughts, and that can create a whole a very toxic and dangerous place, you know, for our faith, you know, because that can lead to, you know, misjudgment. Okay, that can lead to, you know, making poor decisions. Okay, because, you know, everything that we do, all our actions that we you know, all the things we do and we put into action starts in the mind first. Okay, you know, I don't care what it is, anything that we do, you know, it came from a thought, okay, an idea, right? So if we're getting thoughts that don't line up with reality, you know, we don't really fully, you know a situation, you know, the full matter of a certain situation, or wherever the case may be, it's best to just to lean upon Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, trust in the Lord, and the Lord will reveal things in due season. You know, that's where patience comes in to play. You know, because this world, you know, when we out here and we working, doing these, you know, working amongst these different people, you know, we out and about amongst these, you know, these different spirits out here, you know, everything's moving at a fast pace. You know, sometimes you don't really have time to sit back and think and recollect things, you know, because you're on the move, you're on the go. You know, you got to get from this point, you got to get from point A to point B. You got all these different tasks you got to do within your day. You know, so you really don't have time to really, sometimes you don't really have time to sit there and really collect your thoughts and process things, you know. So that's why you know, these scriptures are imperative for us. These instructions that's written in these scriptures, because this is what keeps us centered, you know, in all this chaos out here. You know, this is our guide. You know, so that's why, you know, patience is a very important attribute to have, and that's what this truth is teaching us, to have patience. Okay, matter of fact, this is Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5. It says, trust in the Lord Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. You see, because like I said, that's why I started off with the heart is deceitful above all things. You know, we got to trust in the Lord with all our heart, our mind. Okay, we got to that's where our mind should be leaning towards, trusting in the Lord. Now, of course, the Lord gave us a mind too to judge things. You know, that's where discernment comes in, right? There's times where, you know, we have to exercise our discernment dealing with certain matters and issues. But then there's times where, you know, we got to let the Lord deal. You know, the scriptures say is a time and a purpose for every season under the heaven. Okay, there's a time to speak, and there's a time to refrain from speaking. Okay, there's a time of war, and there's a time of peace. Okay, so it all comes with discernment. Okay, so it's not, there's an what's the word I'm looking for? Every time isn't the time to to move a certain way. Okay, there's times to be assertive. There's times to be to fall back. Okay, and this is all in the word of the Lord. That's why it's important to trust in the Lord, trust the process, because the Lord reveals all. Okay, even when we at our jobs and we dealing with individuals at our jobs, they being demons or whatnot. Okay, just because somebody's being a demon at the job, that doesn't justify us to crash out at the job. Unless, of course, as long as somebody, doesn't pose a physical harm to you, because, we have the right to defend ourselves. I'm not saying to let somebody assault you, but if it's not at to that extent, somebody just doing gestures or just talking shit, there's ways to go about handling things, without, going to the full extreme. Okay. And that's why we got these prayers. We got the curses. You put curses on these individuals. Pray to the Lord to keep you keep your spirit bound, keep you from to keep you in your ways, man. Keep you from losing your cool, losing your edge. Okay, because we coming into some times to where every move we make, it's gonna be crucial, man. The margin for error is going to be very, very thin. Okay, so we gotta make sure we trust in the Lord and not leaning on our own understanding, man. Okay, when it comes to certain things. All right, it says, read again, this back in Proverbs 3:5. It says, trust in the Lord Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai with all thine heart, and lean not upon thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, and depart from evil. You see, and that's the problem with the majority of the people in this world. They're wise in their own eyes. They think that their ways are above the ways of the Lord. Okay, they'll tell you that I'm gonna do me. Doing me is what got me to a certain point. Blah 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 blah. Okay, they're speaking foolishly proud. Okay, and the Lord is getting ready to humble all these individuals out here, man. Okay, the Lord is humbling us every day. Because we're not above correction. We're not above being chastised. Okay, in fact, that's a rite of passage in this thing, is to be chastised by the Lord. Right? And that's a good thing, because that's the Lord keeping us in check, man. That we don't get too high-minded. And see, somebody that becomes wise in their own eyes, that's someone that's high-minded. That individual believes that they can't be told, corrected, they can't be chastised. They have this self-entitlement mentality. And that's not the spirit that any of us should have, man. Especially these times that we coming into, man. We want to make sure, We're in a very humble spirit, very meek spirit, because the times that we come into, if the Lord is not with you, any of us, man, it's about to be crazy out here, man. The Lord ain't with you, man. You through. We're through, man. Well, Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. It's not an amount of training. It's not an amount of doomsday prepping, stockpiling. It's nothing out here, nothing in this world that any of us can do that's gonna sustain us and maintain us through these times without Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, man. There's no way in hell that we're going to be able to get through these things without the Lord, man. Okay? And see, Satan, he's the adversary. Satan is looking for any angle, any avenue, any occasion to cause us to stumble from our walk, our path. So that's why, like I said, I mentioned earlier, that self-examination. Okay? That's why we have prayer. Praying to Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, man. Praying for one another. Pray for the brothers that's around you. Pray for brothers' households, man. Pray for brothers' seeds. Okay, pray for the apostles, the elders, the bishops. Okay, because that we're gonna need all that, man, in these times that's coming. All right, I got another one. This is 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 8. It says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour." That's the adversary, Satan. Okay, Satan out there lurking. And where usually where Satan is going to attack, he's going to attack the mind. Okay, he's going to attack your mind. Have you down in yourself. The whole time, you and your thoughts beating yourself down, letting your sins weigh you down, because one thing, about being in this truth, I mean, all Jay got this, but especially being in this truth, the Lord got us, he gave us that conscience, man, for us to know when we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and when we're doing and what we're doing that we're not supposed to be doing, man. Okay, that conscience is a motherfucker, man, because you can't run from your conscience. If you know you're not doing right, that it's gonna eat away at you, man. Same way, if you know that you're doing the right thing, you're gonna have that assurance, but it's a good thing to have the conscience to know, when we're, slipping, so we can correct it, because it's one thing to, you fucked up, you feel bad about it, right? And then you try to correct your ways. Well, not try, but strive to correct your ways and rectify those things, right? Then to be somebody that, you fucking up, but you don't acknowledge it. You turning a blind eye to it. That's why it says, in Proverbs, to acknowledge your ways, man. We all gotta acknowledge our ways, okay? And the Lord is gonna direct our paths, but we gotta acknowledge. All right. Got another one. This is This is Ecclesiasticus chapter 3, verse 23. It says, "Be not curious in unnecessary matters, for more things are showed unto thee than men understand. For many are deceived by their own vain opinion, and an evil suspicion have overthrown their judgment." You know, and this could lead to poor decision, having an evil suspicion. You know, thinking, like I said, those thoughts. You know, you might, for example, you might be out and about, and you think somebody's staring at you, right? You think somebody's scheming on you, whatever, and you don't know what's in that person's thoughts, right? You don't know who that person is looking at. That person may not even be looking at you. But if you misread the situation and you think that person is looking at you, and you go approach that person, and you don't know, and you don't know who that person is, you can get yourself into a fucked up scenario, where you can possibly lose your life, or you can potentially end up locked up because you lose your cool or whatever. That's what can happen, and it all stems from the mind. Having an evil suspicion. And that's why I said earlier, things that you can play in your mind may not be what's really going on in reality. But like I said, it's a balance too, because there's times where the spirit, the brothers that's in tune with the spirit will let you know how to move during certain situations, having that discernment. When it's time to disperse from a certain area, because you see certain characters and certain demons. How to, that it's time to get the fuck out of there. That's, having that awareness, that's what the spirit will alert us to do in those moments. But I'm speaking on such situations as this, dealing with the mental aspect of things, the things that we have to deal with in our mind, and we have to, discern whether those things are actually happening, or those are just things that are, playing on our thoughts, because there is a difference. All right. So this is, for you brothers out there, you younger brothers, especially because you're new to this thing, make sure you're moving correctly, man. Think before you act, because, you're a part of something that's bigger than you. It's bigger than how you feel. It's bigger than your emotions. Okay. You're part of a body, man. So anything that you do, especially if it's done negatively, it's gonna come back on the body. Okay. So just make sure, this goes for all of us. First and foremost, myself, I'm saying it. This is things that constantly run across my mind. If I do this, it's gonna look bad on the ministry if I do this. Those boundaries got to be set in your mind. You got to have those what's the word I'm looking for? Those spiritual those spiritual lines, knowing those lines not to cross, man. Those boundaries. Okay? Because we are bound. We're prisoners of hope. We just can't do wherever we want to do, man. Okay? Because there's serious consequences that come from that. Okay? All right. This is Slocky, bear me 1 second. Okay, now this is, I'm gonna end it on this. This is Yahweh Shai speaking about the mind as well. because Yahweh Shai spoke this parable, right? Because he, see, these things are written for our learning today. Because Yahweh Shai, he walked in the flesh, okay? Yahweh Shai know what brothers are dealing with, okay? That's why the Lord, he speaks a lot about faith, prayer, okay? Forgiveness, having patience with your brother, okay? All those things, okay? Because these things are going to happen. Tests and trials are going to come upon us, to try us, not to break us, but for us to learn and to grow, okay? And hopefully receive salvation, man, All right, so this is Matthew chapter 12, verse 43. It says, when the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and findeth none. Right, because when we first come into, when we first hear that we are Israelites, right, we're told that we're the Lord's chosen people, and we come into the truth, that demon, that unclean spirit that was in us when we was in the world, that spirit is gone, right? And it says that spirit is looking for another host, another place to dwell, right? And it said he findeth none, right? It says, then he said, I will return into my house from whence I came out. Okay, so that's why I read that scripture where it says Satan is like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Because Satan is out here, he looking, he on the prowl, man. These demons, these spirits is on the prowl. So that's why it's a must that we examine ourselves, pray, fast. When the spirit hits us to fast, okay? Because that demon that was going out, that demon is trying to come back and bring other more demons, okay? All right, it says, and when he has come, he findeth it empty, swept, and garnished. Now, this is an individual that has their guard down, their spiritual guard down, okay? This is an individual that's not applying the scriptures. This is the individual that's not praying, okay? This is an individual that's not applying what the scriptures say. So that demon, that unclean spirit, sees that talking about the mind, that man's mind is empty, swept, and garnished. Okay, it says, then goeth he and taketh himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the state of that man is worse than the first. Even so shall it be also unto this wicked generation. You see that? So that demon brought 7 other more demons more wicked than the first demon. Okay, and we see that with these guys that were once a part of the faith, that were once in the truth, and they go back into the world. Jake is through, man. Jake is all the way gone, man. They like it says, they're worse than when they worse than when they were when they first came in. Before they came in, when they was in the world coming into the truth, they're worse than that state, and that's scary, man. That should always keep us in fear and check with the Lord, man. So the point is, is to rebuke these evil thoughts. Okay, don't let your sins weigh you down. Okay, don't always keep constantly putting yourself down. Being in that woe is me spirit. We gotta fight through that, man. And like I said, the heart is deceitful. Our mind is deceitful, man. When it comes to, especially when it comes to shit that's wicked, man. Okay? So with that, like I said, I pray this is edifying to you sincere brothers, a few sisters out there. Stay strong, keep fighting. We're almost out of here. So with that, I'm going to give all glory and praises to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Honors and salutations to the hopeful elect. Pushing his word, true sincerity. Shalom.